never thought we would see the President of the United States turn the Internal Revenue.
Susan Jackson, Anne Marie Jordan, John Shipman, Marie Silver.
And I was a member and then we were in the process of moving, so I did not.
My name is John Shipman. I'd like to get to know especially all the veterans.
We're very lucky, we're very blessed to have the group of individuals who are dedicated so much of their time, efforts, wealth to serve.
We told the federal government, you know what, if you want it so bad, you set it up, you spend your money. If you want it, you pay for it.
Every year, we're very fortunate to have our elected officials, the ones who serve us in Tallahassee, come and join us. It happens every May right after the session ends, and this year is no different. We're very lucky, we're very blessed to have the group of individuals who are dedicated so much of their time, efforts, wealth to serving the people of this fine state. Tonight, you'll see on both sides of the table, you'll see a number of elected officials. And I've asked them to come up and spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes going and briefly telling us what happened in Tallahassee, perhaps, what they think that this last session is noted for, anything good, anything bad that happened in Tallahassee. And then when they've all done speaking, we are going to take some written questions. And I'm sure Charlotte has those papers somewhere. And then I want you to, Lee, down there, grab a pen, write some questions up, and he'll bring them up front and we'll ask some questions, okay? So, starting first, we're going to start with our newest senator here in Pinellas County. We're going to have Senator Jeff Brandes.
Well, before I tell you what we did, let me tell you what we didn't do, because I think that's just as important. We didn't raise your taxes. We didn't create a healthcare exchange. We told the federal government, you know what, if you want it so bad, you set it up, you spend your money. If you want it, you pay for it. And we did not obligate your kids and your grandkids to pay for an expensive Medicaid expansion that they would be paying for generations. And that's, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is only in thanks to our strong support that we had from the members of the Florida House. Let me tell you, they stood firm on that, and we can thank them, I can't thank them enough for what they did to hold firm and the amount of pressure that they went through to hold firm on that vote, to say, no, we're not going to expand Medicaid. It's not the right decision. It's not the right decision for my kids. It's not the right decision for my grandkids. It was the right thing for them to do. And we're blessed to have great House members with us today. Governor Scott got his 2 priorities done. One, we're going to give highly effective and effective teachers a pay raise. The effective teachers are going to get $2,500 pay raise, and the highly effective teachers are going to get a $3,500 pay raise. That's a great thing. Look, our teachers they're a gift to us. They really are. If you've ever seen a great teacher in action, it's like watching an artist. And so we should compensate them accordingly, because they do the Lord's work. Yeah. We gave manufacturers, those people who want to come to our state and establish a manufacturing job, we gave them a sales tax credit for 3 years. We're not going to charge them sales tax on manufacturing equipment. That should increase the amount of people that are getting involved in manufacturing in our state. I think that's an extremely positive thing. And finally, we have an ethics and elections bill that I think we can all be proud of, that clearly defines how members should treat each other, how members should deal with the incredible amount of money in this system. I think it's very clear now what the rules are and what the rules aren't. And I think that you should be very proud that Florida will have an incredibly transparent ethics and election system. I want to talk to you about one of my priorities this year that I'm very proud of. We had 1 out of 3 pension bills passed this year, and that was one that myself and Representative Matt Caldwell from Fort Myers worked on. Today in the state of Florida, we have almost about 500 municipal pension plans. 500 cities that offer, municipalities that offer different pension plans. Of those, about half are underfunded. And some of those are dramatically underfunded. If you look at the city of Jacksonville, for example, the city of Jacksonville actually took over the county and runs all of the county services. Their pensions are funded between 50 and 60% funded. So you have 6,000 police, firefighters, and municipal service employees that are expecting pensions that honestly, I don't know how that they are going to cover their pension obligations. And what's worse, when they set their pensions up, they opted out of Social Security. So this is all they have. But what we said in the pension bill that's sitting on the governor's desk right now is, look, you made those choices, but it's not the state's job to pay for your unfunded pension. If you made those choices and your municipality failed to fund those pensions, you need to get out. It shouldn't be the taxpayers of Pinellas County that do it. It should be you and the city of Jacksonville that do it. And we want you to be very transparent in how you deal with your pensions. And we want to see exactly how your pensions are funded. This is incredibly important. People do not understand that unfunded pensions are like a cancer growing within a city. That every year it takes more and more of the city's resources to pay unfunded pension obligations. And after a while, they're firing police officers, they're firing firefighters, they're laying off civil servants, they're laying off the people that are important for us to conduct the day-to-day operations of government. So we can pay for those that, because of decisions that we've made today, and they're paying in promises. They're not paying in dollars, they're paying in promises. And this is unconscionable. So thankfully, with this bill, when the governor signs it, Florida will have one of the most transparent municipal pension plans in the United States, and we're very thankful for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Brandis. And next, we have Representative Jamie Grant from District 64. I think this is the first time he's spoken before us, so it's great to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great night to be here. Just to introduce myself, because I haven't met all of you, my name is Jamie Grant. I just wrapped up my 3rd year in the legislature. In 2010, I got elected to a district that was all of Northwest Hillsborough County predominantly, and then through the redistricting process, I am, I believe, the only House member that delicately straddles the Hillsborough-Pinellas line. So I want to thank all of you who have graciously welcomed me to this delegation. I want you to know that you have a tremendous delegation. And I'll talk real briefly. I think Senator Brandis hit on a couple of significant points, but the time we spend together, you find out very quickly the mettle of the people you're in a foxhole with. And this group up here is a group that I would gladly go into this process every day with. And so I want to talk real briefly about just a couple of things. I talked about the delegation, but at about the same time I was getting some phone calls from Sheriff G. Larry Ahern was getting some phone calls from Sheriff Gualtieri and a number of law enforcement officials around the state that were starting to highlight the fact that Tampa Bay was becoming famous for yet again something that we didn't necessarily want to be famous for, and that was identity fraud and tax theft. And we are seeing nationally that this effort was happening. And so as I began to work with our criminal justice staff on the committee I serve on, they said to me, well, you know, Representative Ahern in your own delegation has a bill that he's currently working on. And so Larry and I teamed up on that, and I know Larry will talk a little bit more about that. But Larry really was a champion to make sure that we don't hear stories anymore of senior citizens or veterans or those in our community having their information stolen, having their identity stolen, and spending years and thousands and tens upon thousands of dollars trying to get that back. And so that was something that I was very proud to help get done this year with Larry's leadership. Secondly, the gentleman, I missed his name, but he talked about organizing veterans. Is that you? Thank you.
Senator Brandis is one of my first volunteers.
I'll tell you one of the things we did this year, and this really came from Attorney General Pam Bondi's leadership, but the General reached out to me and she said, Jamie, we've really got to do something about some of these orchestrated schemes going after our veterans. And we have something called the Florida Deceptive Unfair Trade Practices Act. It's not any all that different than than the federal. My office is going to cringe in the back, but FDUCTA, as we joke and say. But it's fairly similar. And what we did this year was ensure that the Attorney General's office had the tools to go after some of these orchestrated schemes that are targeting our veterans, taking advantage of our veterans, and giving law enforcement and the Attorney General's office the tools to protect our veterans with the second largest veteran population in the country. It was important to me, it was important to our caucus and the Attorney General's office that we take care of those veterans. Lastly, when it comes to something we did, and Senator Brandes hit on it, but I want to be real clear. The challenge with Medicaid was not easy. On one side, you had a feel-good story that said, don't you believe that everybody should have health care? Don't you believe that everybody should have access to health care? Well, yeah, I do. Do you think that the taxpayers and that future generations should be burdened with it is a very different question. And so when we talk about our one obligation when we go to Tallahassee, our one obligation every year is to balance the budget. I would submit to you this year that we not only balance this year's budget, but we preserve the ability to balance the budget for generations to come. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but it was right. And one of the things that came up, and as we debated the Medicaid expansion on the floor, I'm sure some of you read about Mary, the auto reader, and the torment that we... Anybody read about Mary? Mary, we still have nightmares about Mary. But we had an auto reader because the Democrats had asked that we read all of the bills, suggesting that if they could torture us into reading all of the bills aloud in the chamber, that we would somehow buckle and suggest that future generations' stability was worth our time. And so we suffered through it. They finally gave in, and we refused to expand Medicaid. But I do want to highlight one person on this panel who deserves a lot of credit. In the weeks leading up to that vote, there were numerous organizations financially vested in the expansion of Medicaid. And they began running ads. TV, radio, one after the other. And as we got closer and closer to taking that vote, these groups that had targeted Republicans in moderate or swing districts began to ramp up the ad buys. Kathleen Peters was one of those people who had ads run against her time after time after time after time. And I will say this, that of all the people across the state that had ads run against them time after time after time, only one stood up on the floor of the Florida House this year and said, I refuse to expand Medicaid because it is fiscally irresponsible. And it was Kathleen Peters. And she drove out. I'll leave you with just a simple analogy when it comes to Medicaid. One of the things that was thrown at us was, how can you turn down free money? How can you turn down $51 billion of federal, how can you turn it down? Here's the question I pose to people in the district and constituents that ask me that question. Imagine you live in a $200,000 house today, and the bank comes to you, and they say, Maureen, we're going to put you in a $2 million house. Sounds nice. You're going to sign the mortgage, but for the first 3 years, we're going to pay 100% of the mortgage. Every year after that, we're going to pay 90% of the mortgage. So at the end of the day, you're living in a $2 million house, paying 10% of the mortgage, same payment you're making on the $200,000 house roughly. The problem is the bank has serious liquidity problems. The problem is the bank can't pay its own bills. The problem is the bank can't agree what day it is, let alone how they're going to service my loan. And so the question we had before us was, will we give even more autonomy to a completely dysfunctional federal government? Or will we reserve the right in our state to suggest that we can give health care to those who truly need it and can't afford it in a more efficient and timely manner than the federal government? And I think we can. With the group in Tallahassee we have right now, I absolutely believe the plan we put forward in the House is a massive step forward to suggesting that we're not going to let the argument be framed over whether or not those who truly need health care and can't afford it should have access to care. The question is, how do we most efficiently give them the best care possible? And it's not through the federal government. Amen. I want to thank all of you. It is a tremendous honor to be part of this delegation. It is a tremendous honor to serve with this delegation. I look forward to working with you this year as we move forward and get geared up for another session where, as Jeff put it, sometimes our job is most important to kill bad bills, because that's a whole nother night of legislative updates. But thank you very much. Jamie Grant.
Representative Grant, I think I live right across the street from the border of his district, so maybe next time they redistrict, I'll be in your district.
They're moving me around a good bit.
They have been? Okay, very good. The next representative is Larry Ahern from St. Pete. He's a favorite. District 66.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be home again. As I said on Facebook, home sweet home. It's quite a trying time to be up there and away from all your loved ones, and sometimes you miss all the things that go on here. And one of those things that struck me as I came back and got to see everyone, was someone who was missing tonight, and who was a good friend of mine and a good friend of all the veterans, with his wife Sandy, and that's Bill Hutton. And I just wanted to make honorable mention of him and all the things he meant to the veterans, certainly, but to and Sandy's work here with the party and all the things that they do that have made life easier for all of us. So we miss you, Bill. We know where you are, and we thank you for your service, not only to our country, but to the principles and values that we all hold so dear here in the Republican Party. What a great delegation. We've talked about it somewhat so far, but the strength of this delegation is amazing. Short of the Miami delegation, they seem to have a special sort of a bond, as it were. I would put this delegation up against any others in the state. We truly have some of the best members that are willing to go to the mat for each other, even if it sometimes they might disagree on a point here or a point there of a policy. We put those differences aside and make sure that the principles and values that we espouse as a party are strong and true, and that we're true to them. I guess Jamie didn't get the memo, but I had the Medicare, Medicaid portion of this, but and that's the only thing that we'll probably all expand on a little bit, is that this, because it was a big issue, and there was some talk about the Senate plan and the governor's acceptance of this proposal, but this was vetted through a separate committee for months. I can't tell you how many hours that it consumed to examine all the different ways that this could affect Florida, and the House came with a plan, a really good plan, to backfill where it was necessary with real money. Not borrowed, not yen, but real money from the state of Florida that would cover the parents of the children on Medicaid. It would cover the disabled. A really good plan. And unfortunately, nothing was considered seriously enough to be done. But I'm hoping that plan will be the plan. That was the Corcoran-Bean plan that was proposed by Richard Corcoran and Senator Bean, and that was would have truly been the one that could be the most help to the citizens of Florida. You have to understand, 40% of the state's budget is Medicaid, 30% is education. So if you would put another 1 million people into the Medicaid system, and it fails in any way, shape, or form, or this partner, as Jamie put it, this bank, fails up on its obligation, and you still have to pay that, where does the money come from? It's going to come from education, your court systems, your roads, your bridges, all the things that government has to fund in order to sustain our state. So those are the things that had to be considered, and I think common sense prevailed, especially in the House, and we held the line. And I'm just so proud of the folks on especially our Representative Corcoran, our Speaker designate, as it were, for his leadership and his willingness to just hold that line. In lieu of any more talk about that, the governor's right. It's working. Florida's turning the corner. I mean, some of the things that happened in this session in terms of the small business, the manufacturing sales tax exemption passed. That's going to be a huge stimulus to the economic boom in the manufacturing sector. That means jobs when people start to upgrade their equipment and to expand because of this sales tax exemption. The workman's compensation bill that closes a loophole that was allowing doctors to dispense drugs without any price controls. That's going to be amazing savings for our employers on the workman's compensation tax. The paid leave pre-exemption, it was going to mandate paid leave on private employees. If you can imagine that, everyone that worked at a hotel or any small business in Florida was going to be mandated now to give paid leave. Here's the government trying to interfere with the private sector and how they do business. So huge savings there to our state. There was a bad check law. Again, a lot of things that you're probably not going to hear a lot about. One that is so important in education. Now a dual diploma for people that aren't going to go to college. Some of the high school students will now be able to get a certification that would take them into a job at the end of high school, be trained and certified in the private sector for whatever position, maybe air conditioning or electrical, something that would allow them to move right into a job that is not going So we're looking forward to your questions, but and I'm sure we'll have some updates as we go forward. But it was a really, really good session on par. There were a lot of, I think, some misconceptions about some of the things that maybe you heard about or read about, and we'll be glad to clear those up, maybe in through your questions. So thank you again.
As an employer, a small employer with about 20 employees, I really regret many times the government coming in and getting between myself and my employees. I know what's best for my company. My employees, I meet every day, and we talk and we have candid discussions. And when a third party comes in and starts telling us how to act between us, I really regret that. It makes it very difficult. So I appreciate all the comments that you said about that. Very good. Let's move on. Representative Ed Hooper. District 4067.
I moved. I didn't know it. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Feather Sound, which used to be my district. But it's not now. It's Senator Brandon's district. I'm going to start not talking about anything legislatively. I'm going to start by thanking everybody in this room for your thoughts and your prayers. To me and my family in this session, starting on the 12th of March, in a span of 5 weeks, I lost my father, a good representative, Clay Ford from Pensacola, my son-in-law, and my brother in a span of 5 weeks. So thank you for your thoughts, your prayers, and your kind words and comments to Lee and I. Know that we appreciate the cards and the comments very much, and you will all have a special place in our hearts forever. So thank you for that. Thank God for Speaker Will Weatherford.
Amen.
A young man whose star is going to rise to a level that I can't even envision. A good man of moral character, conviction, conservative values, and the right person to lead the Florida House of Representatives for this past session and the one upcoming. I'm so proud to serve with him. I'm the senior member, unfortunately, chronologically and in terms of years of service of this delegation. I wish there was only one of those, but that's okay. Weatherford and I got elected and started in the same term, and we've kind of grown up in this process together. And he impresses me every day that I'm around him. Look for that name to surface somewhere in a big way down the road, because he's not done with being Speaker of the Florida House. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of this delegation. This delegation did do an incredible job. And I'm not going to talk about Medicaid. I'm not going to talk about any of the stuff that you've heard about. But this delegation sticks together. And I will tell you that Senator Brandes talked about the householding firm in the Medicaid discussion. I told you I wasn't going to talk about it, and I'm talking about it. But he didn't toot his own horn, but I want to tell you, he joined the House members in voting with that conviction of not to expand Medicaid, and I think he deserves a round of applause. You know, all of us along the way, we sort of, as you journey through your 8 years maximum, if you're fortunate enough to be there, you sort of pick, do I want to be involved in policy or do I want to be involved in appropriations? I went with the money. It interests me more than dealing with policy and maybe having to drive somebody else's policy that you may not like. I like the money. And I'm fortunate this past session and hopefully the next one to be the House Chair of the Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations. And that's just under $11 billion of your money that is spent in a variety of ways that surprised even me when we started meeting last November to discuss the upcoming budget. And it won't take long. It's not a lot of agencies. I want to tell you what that and my House staff, not my local staff, but the Tallahassee staff found a zero font that I can't read. That oversees the entire Department of Economic Opportunity, which is Enterprise Florida, Visit Florida, Space Florida, Workforce Services, Strategic Business Development, and Community Development, the Florida Highway Patrol, Driver's License Bureau, Motor Tags and Titles, Motor Carrier Compliance, Department of State, the Elections Division, which now has to implement new election laws, Cultural Affairs, Library Services, Corporation, Historical Resources, all of the military, Florida National Guard, and military readiness and response. And last and certainly not least, who gets the biggest part of the money, is the Department of Transportation and everything they do for our highways, our seaports, our airports, our bridges, our railroads, and port expansions. That's $11 billion that's distributed amongst the state to take care of every one of those issues. And I think my proudest moment in that distribution of those funds is for the first time in 6 years, we did not raid the Transportation Trust Fund. The promises we make for the projects that are important for your community and mine, the money's going to be in that trust fund to complete those projects and get the bonding necessary to get that construction done and help us move about on every road improvement. We're not going to dredge the port of St. Pete, but we're going to really improve the port of Tampa. The Panama Canal opens in a year and a half. And when that happens, the rest of the world is spending money to attract that commerce that comes through that expanded canal. And Florida is blessed with some of the best ports, closest ports to that canal. And if we miss that boat, the world will leave us in the dust. So we'll be ready. Lastly, before we take, we have the newest member of our delegation to follow me. I want to take just a moment. This is my last term. I have one more session. I want you to know still every day how much I appreciate being able to represent you in Tallahassee. The trust you have put in me, I take that seriously every day. When I walk on that House floor, I never forget my job is not my agenda. My job is my constituents' agenda. And that happens seriously every day. And thanks for allowing me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Representative Hooper. And now, certainly, finally last, but certainly not the least. I'm tempted to say that she is certainly the prettiest person of our delegation. But I'm not going to say that because I don't want to embarrass her. So I don't think I need to make any introductions for our newest member, Representative Kathleen Peters, District 69.
What a great day, what a great group. It is so good to be here. So we went from our senior legislator to our freshman legislator, and it's good to be here. You know, I really want to talk about a couple things. And I'm not going to talk about what you've already heard about. And I knew when I got up here that I would talk about something very different, and you all let me have that opportunity. So, aside from what we did for Pinellas County, let me tell you, one of my number one priorities, and I will tell you, I am really proud of this, and it wasn't just me, this was a team of folks that helped me with this. For those of you that don't know, right here in Pinellas County, we have, St. Pete College has one of 10 colleges in the country has an orthotics and prosthetic program. So we're 1 in 10. Now when you are 1 in 10, that's a niche. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Well, we took that niche and we're making it a golden opportunity. And I am so proud to say, with the help of my legislators in this delegation, we got the funding to make St. Petersburg College the first and only center of excellence for orthotics and prosthetics in the country. Now, with Haley's VA hospital right across the bay being the designated VA hospital for all veteran amputees, with Shriners being one of the top hospitals producing orthotics and prosthetics for pediatrics, this is the right place for that program. And I am so proud that we're going to, and St. Petersburg College, if you did not know it, is already doing clinical trials on biosensors. So that whole biotechnology research and development has now crossed the bay into Pinellas County. We are now part of that I-4 corridor for biotechnology research, and I am thrilled that we are part of it, and we're going to grow it and we're going to expand it, and I just think that's going to do great things for jobs. So that was my number one priority, and I am really proud to report on that. I'm also proud to let you know that we're protecting our beaches, and after Tropical Storm Debbie came through, we lost a lot of sand on Treasure Island and St. Pete Beach, and it's really important that we keep our beaches as pristine and wonderful as they are, and we did get beach renourishment money. I hope that the governor keeps that in there. That is critically important that we keep up on that schedule. I promised Senator Jones that I would never let anything happen to our beaches, and I worked very hard to make sure that we're protecting our beaches, so I'm really proud of that too. There's some other stuff that's really great, but what I really want to talk to you about is, and we mentioned, a couple of people mentioned Speaker Weatherford. And being a freshman, I can tell you, I watched everything. And his leadership is true servant leadership. And I want to tell you how it was displayed. We did major renovation and overhaul of the education system for high school and for early learning. Do you know in the House of Representatives, those bills passed, what, 117-0? To bring that body of diverse opinions on what is right for the education of our children and making workforce training the most important thing for our future, he was able, and the committee chairs on all of those education committees were able to bring everybody in that chamber together, unified, to make sure that education was the number one thing, and we made sure that we came up with a plan that everybody would support because we knew it was the right plan. And I am excited about that. And I would love to hear people shouting from the rooftop about those accomplishments, because that's our future. We can't have great economic development unless we have a sound, outstanding, excellent education system, absolutely, positively. And you want to know how else we're protecting our most vulnerable? Not only are we protecting our future, the other thing that I haven't heard much from, and this is close to my heart, this is something 20 years ago when I worked at the Juvenile Welfare Board, this was a problem. And it has always slipped through the cracks, and this year was different because we care about our children, we care about our most vulnerable. And the kids in our foster care system, aside from not being funded appropriately, am I correct, Sheriff? I know you're here, right? If he scooted out, we were getting less funding per child than any other county in the state, and that has changed. That has changed. But you know what else has changed? Do you know, by a child who gets in foster care, by no virtue of what they have done, they couldn't have a normal life. If they were 12 years old and they wanted to go to a slumber party, they had to get a background check of everybody that was going to be in that house. And if you are 12 years old, do you want to let your friends know? So are you going to be able to go to that slumber party? You can't cross the county borders. And so now, for the first time, foster parents who have dedicated their life to taking care of these children now have a say-so, and these kids can now go to movies, and they can go to slumber parties, and they can have some sort of a normal life, because we truly, truly care about our most vulnerable. And we were able to step up in this session and take care of our most vulnerable. And I am really proud of the 2 laws that passed for foster care. The other one, I had somebody send me a letter, and it shook me up. I kept that letter out on my desk for 2 weeks because it upset me. It said that foster children are a tax to our society. And they didn't sign it, and it was written in crayon, and it really upset me. And there was a Road to Independence bill that was out. And some people may say this isn't okay, but I would challenge them even on the fiscal impact on this. Where when you were 18 years old, if you're in foster care and you're 18 years old and it is September when you turn 18, you were aged out of the system and the state was no longer your guardian. And no matter what, if you didn't finish high school, you were a senior in high school, you were done in the system and you couldn't live in that foster home anymore, and you had to get an apartment, you had to live on your own, and yet you were still a senior in high school. Are we protecting our children? We were not. But we are now. So as long as they stay in school, they can stay in that foster home until they are 21 years old. And they can get a future. And those parents will make sure that they have the financial that they need, and that they get the training that they need so they can live independently and they can be successful. And I challenge them, because most kids in the foster care system that aged out at 18, they ended up homeless, they ended up on the streets, they ended up committing crimes, they ended up having single parents. The cost that it was costing us long term by not making sure that they could be independent was extremely high. And I believe that this bill not only is going to take care of our most vulnerable, but I believe it's going to save us money in the long term, because they're going to be successful and they're not going to end up in our systems either through welfare or through the criminal justice system. So I won't go on. Those are my soapboxes. I am proud, very, very proud of how we pass bills that are truly, truly taking care of the residents of Florida and our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That's our legislative delegation. Thank you very much for appearing tonight. We appreciate having you here. Okay, now we're going to go into some questions. We have several questions that I think are very interesting and appropriate. Now, a couple of things. A word to the wise. If you're going to write down a question, please make sure your handwriting's legible. It's tough to guess some of these things. And rather than guess, I usually just don't ask them. The second thing is this: if you use abbreviations, Senate bill that, House bill this, you have to sort of fill in the gaps, because there's lots of them out there, so we don't sometimes know what you're talking about. So I'm going to try to get through many of the questions that we have tonight. Elected officials, anyone can answer these. If you feel like you want to make a statement about the question I'm asking, feel free to come on up, and you may want to come around the front of the table rather than going around the back. And give your answers. So let's see. Let's start off. The first one is there have been discussions recently regarding state employee pensions. Are you open to the idea of eventually replacing all defined benefit pension plans with the easier to manage defined contribution plans? Somebody want to take that?
We don't have any insurance people.
Senator Brandis is the proud one. There you go. There you go. He's the brave one.
This year, the House had that proposal. They had voted to get rid of defined benefit plans, and it died in the Senate. It died in the Senate 22-18. And so what I think you're going to see next year is us bringing back another plan to do something very similar. But that proposal is out there. It's working. We're working through the issues that the few handful of senators had. I mean, think about it. You were 3 Senate votes away from doing away with the defined benefit plan and moving to a defined contribution plan. And so we need to work on that. We need to get 3 senators, and we'll be set for next year.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add to it that because of Senator Brandes' bill, they'll now be determining, and correct me if I'm wrong, the rate of return based on a corporate bond, more realistic rate of return than what is, right now it's estimated in perpetuity because governments never end, so to speak. And there's a 7.5% projected return, and we know that can, on average, change. And so, and I believe that was that your bill, yeah. So, and it's now going to be based on a shorter term corporate bond rate of return, and we did pass it in the House. The idea, and that was one of the Speaker's priorities, quite honestly. The idea was to ultimately protect those in the system because it's an 87%. That still means that 13% of the people wouldn't get paid if it ended tomorrow. And again, these things do fluctuate. So and so many of the cities, the municipalities, and really all over the country, you can look at their pension systems and see. That's the thing, that's sort of the ring around their neck that is keeping them from being able to recover, because they're having to pour so much of their tax dollars into that plan to save it. And we've even had some local plans that municipalities that are in trouble. So the idea was to protect the state, ultimately to go to the defined contribution. So we think it'll be back next year, and hopefully the Senate will see it our way.
Thank you, Representative Ahern. Actually, I don't know if you realize this. He said a mouthful about rates of return. Some of the largest problems that we have in state government is found in states like California, like Illinois, like New York, where they've estimated a higher rate of return on the money they invest. What that does is, if you say there's 7.5%, we're going to assume 7.5% rate of return going forward. That means they have to put less money in the pension plan today, which means they could spend more money. But then when the year comes in and they have a 2% return, which is a lot more accurate, then that means they have a deficit now. And if you keep doing that year after year, you have a major problem. Eventually, after 10 years, we have major problems. So that's why this is terribly irresponsible, what they're doing. And I personally am very proud of your actions. Very good. How about another question? How will the Florida leadership help veterans with seeking jobs, and more importantly, this handwriting thing again, folks. And more importantly, health benefits. Also, who specifically is working on this problem? In other words, providing veterans with to help find jobs and help them with health benefits. Somebody want to answer that?
Jamie, you can back up some.
Okay. Very good.
I'll be very brief. A couple things that have happened over the last couple of years. 2 years ago, I ran a deregulation package that did a lot of things that I think streamline business and make it easier for folks to get back to work. It dealt with continuing education, a number of things. One of the things that was lost in there was the fact that we passed into law a waiver of any professional licensing for veterans in the state of Florida if they were 2 years removed from service. And so we wanted to send a message throughout the country that veterans who were recently removed from service, that they could come here and receive a professional license without having to pay that fee. But secondly, was a bill that was kind of filed simultaneously and in conjunction with that effort to provide in-state tuition to any active duty member of our military. Unfortunately, last year that provision failed. One of the things you learn in the legislature is that sometimes the chairman or the chairwoman is the difference between a bill proceeding through the process and a bill dying in that process. I'm incredibly happy to report that Jeanette Nunez, a very good friend of mine and a chair in our Education and Workforce Development Committee this year, tacked that amendment on to an education provision. So as of this year, pending the governor's signature, we will have in-state tuition for veterans from around the country, provided that they are actually receiving their education here and located in the state of Florida, because we do believe that the skill set that it takes to be a member of our military and the skills learned in our military can only benefit our economy and our community. And so we do want to send a message throughout the country that we will be the most welcoming state when it comes to veterans trying to get back into the workforce. And it may only be first down at a time, but in the last couple of years we've I think, put some good points on the board to send that message out.
I'm going to follow up on that. That veteran tuition bill this year was my bill that Representative Nunez put on another bill, and unfortunately, Representative,
She got it done this year. I couldn't.
Well, I'm afraid to say that I'm not sure that it got done. I have been told that it did not go through the Senate, and I got busy at the end, and we didn't follow through because I was told it was not being heard. So we will follow up and make sure, and if it didn't go through, we will make sure next year it will. And Senator Brandis, we're going to call on you to make darn sure that it gets through this round if it did not. And last year we also got veterans preference. I was not in the legislature, but I helped spur that bill last year to make sure that veterans got preference on bids. But what I can also tell you is, somebody asked, what are we doing? Now, I do serve on the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. And one thing that Florida is doing that I think is smart, and we are rated the #1 state in the country veteran friendly. And that's something I can tell you our entire legislature is very proud of. The other thing that Florida is doing is they've been buying up land surrounding the military bases, which is really critically important to provide a buffer zone around our military bases to ensure that local government and other businesses don't encroach on those areas and then restrict the activities that can be done once they encroach. So Eglin, up in the Panhandle, we have purchased a lot of property along the waterfront surrounding Eglin, and at this point I believe that military base will definitely be secure. Not only does it have the buffer to protect the environment, and this is environmental land that is precious to Florida, it is part of our wonderful resources, and it will be protected because it's just strictly going to be used as a buffer and it can stay in its natural state. So that is something that we have done for our military bases across the state to ensure that we have a strong military base, they won't get shut down. We're ensuring that they can operate at maximum capacity without having encroachment that will limit or restrict what they can do. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more questions. What is Common Cause and was it passed? Common Core. Sorry. That was my handwriting, by the way. Does anyone want to talk about Common Core?
In the last probably 3 months, I've heard more about Common Core than I have in the last 3 years. And I know that there's a lot of concerns among concerned Republicans about Common Core and what's happening. And I think that's something that we need to be taking very seriously. And there's some discussion that it's a federal takeover of education, that they're very concerned about the amount of data that's out there and the amount of data that's going to be utilized. I'll tell you that Florida is taking a very hard look at Common Core. That was passed a number of years ago that we would look into Common Core. So Florida has basically signed on to looking at Common Core. But as the rules and regulations for Common Core come out, you will see the legislature, which is now kind of on a heightened sense of alert about what Common Core is and where it's going. taking a very hard look at what our participation level will be with the group of Common Core. What is Common Core? Common Core is a common set of standards amongst all the participating states. So I think about 47 states have signed on to a common set of graduation standards or standards for education. And the main concerns that go along with those standards is, the Constitution leaves to the states the ability to set its own education priorities. And there is some concern that this is kind of a federal takeover of our education system. And there's also some concern about the amount of data that's being collected about individual students and how that data may be used in the future.
The last question has to do with private property rights. Was any private property rights legislation passed this term, or was it all done last term? I know it's kind of broad. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Come on, talk about it.
Would that be private property? All I got.
I was going to say, do we have any lawyers in the crowd? Anybody? Sorry, I just want to make... Adverse possession was something I thought I would never hear about after I graduated from law school. And for the lawyers that were too scared to raise their hand, we actually dealt with legislation this year on adverse possession. Adverse possession is an old common law doctrine that allows me to take your property if you don't use it and I meet certain criteria. So we had a good chuckle about that. But to the chairman's question, we passed a foreclosure bill this year. And I will quite candidly admit to having some significant concerns about it. I think we need to be very, very, very cautious about the way in which we allow lenders to speed up the process of taking private property. One of the biggest concerns I have, there's a number of things happening. Property is sitting on the courthouse at auction, and dock stamps aren't being paid when the bank buys it back. And so a lot of times there's an incentive not to actually move that property. I understand that the banks have an interest in these properties. They ought to be able to judiciously use our system to exercise their rights as a lender. And the system ought not be ripe for anybody to abuse. But I think we all, and I think I speak for everybody up here, the way that a piece of advice I was given when I ran for office is that every legislation is a cheeseburger with a shard of glass in it. And if you're hungry enough, you'll eat it. And if you're worried about the shard of glass enough, you won't. And this foreclosure bill was one of those examples for me. It wasn't a perfect bill. It was something that I had significant concerns about. But I think I speak for everybody in our delegation when I say we're remaining committed to coming back and looking at it. If we didn't get it right, it has been a tremendous process. Representative Kathleen from down in Naples has spent a lot of time on it. And so we passed that bill this year, and I think we have to be willing to come back and examine the parts of that bill that we got right, potentially some of the parts we got wrong, to make sure that private property rights are not disenfranchised by legislation that speeds up unnecessarily or inappropriately the ability for lenders to foreclose on properties.
I'm not sure if this resonates with the question, but what I can tell you is another bill that I had that I'm really proud of too, because it came from our constituents right here in Pinellas County, and it was a contentious issue that folks have been dealing with for a long time, and that's the submerged land leases with the state. And if it does not impact you, I'm just going to give you a quick scenario. If you live in a condominium or you live in a townhouse on the water, you have a dock, you have to pay a tax for your common area maintenance that goes to maintenance repair for that dock, so cleats and wood and stuff like that. You have to have a permit that you have to renew for that dock that you pay tax on. Then you have to pay a lease to the state for the submerged land that your dock sits on in the area that you bring your boat in and out on. Plus you have to pay a tax on that lease because it's a commercial lease. The contention is, across the canal, in a single-family home on the same submerged land, most single-family homes are exempt and they don't have to pay anything. And it doesn't matter that your homestead is in that condo or that townhouse, you have to pay all those taxes and fees. And it just isn't fair and it's not equitable. And so that was put on HB 999. Again, that was a bill that started from the folks in Tierra Verde are the ones that were very loud and very vocal because they are paying a lot of money. Pinellas County's right behind Miami, and how much we pay on submerged land leases, and it just isn't fair and it's not equitable just because you chose to live in a condominium. So I am proud to tell you that that one passed as well, and we wait on the governor's signing of that one. So that is an unnecessary tax and fee that we're going to eliminate for property owners. So.
Wow, I never thought that I'd come to a Republican meeting and we'd start talking about submerged land leases with the state. But I'm impressed. All right, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, please give our representatives a round of applause. We're very lucky to have them.